I stood in the kitchen, chopping onions for dinner, when Jessica dropped the bomb that would flip my world upside down. She leaned against the counter, adjusting the strap of her green dress, the one I'd picked out for her birthday last year, and said it so casually I almost missed it. "I'm going on a date with another man tonight." The knife froze mid-slice, and I looked up, blinking through the sting in my eyes. Her reflection in the window smirked back at me, like she'd just told me she was grabbing coffee with a friend. For a second, I thought it was a joke, some weird test of my reaction. But the way she avoided my gaze, twirling a strand of her dark hair, told me this was no prank. This was real. My pulse thumped in my ears, but I kept my voice steady. "Excuse me," I said, setting the knife down before I did something stupid with it. Jessica sighed, like I was the one being dramatic. "You heard me, Ryan," she said, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "I've got plans tonight, with someone else." It wasn't just the words. It was how she said them. Like it was nothing. Like she wasn't wearing a dress I'd bought her to announce she was stepping out on me. I gripped the edge of the counter, my mind racing to catch up. "A date," I repeated, letting the word hang there, heavy and sharp. She shrugged, that smirk still playing on her lips. "Yeah, a date. Don't make it a thing." "A thing?" I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat, dry and bitter. My chest tightened, but I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, staring at the woman I'd been married to for 6 years, wondering how I'd missed the moment she turned into a stranger. "You expect me to just be okay with this?" I asked, forcing a slow breath. Her smirk shifted, colder now, like she was explaining something to a kid. "I expect you to deal with it like an adult," she said. "We've been together forever. Things get stale. I want to feel alive again, you know? Explore what's out there." I let out a quiet, humorless chuckle. My head was spinning, but I stayed calm. Too calm, maybe. "So, you're just seeing someone else now?" I said, keeping my tone even. No heads up, no talking it out, just this. She shrugged again, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You'd have figured it out eventually. Why pretend? I'm not even leaving you, not yet anyway." No apology, no hesitation. She'd already decided, and I was supposed to nod and go along with it. I watched her adjust her dress in the mirror, like she hadn't just cracked our marriage open with a few careless words. She thought she'd walk out that door and I'd just wait here, stewing, while she had her fun. Something clicked in me then. Not anger. Not yet, but a quiet, sharp clarity. She was going on a date with someone else. It should have torn me apart, made me want to scream until the walls shook. But instead, I felt awake, like I'd been sleepwalking through my life and someone had just flipped on the lights. Jessica sighed, turning back to me, annoyed that I wasn't falling apart like she'd expected. "What?" she snapped, shifting her purse to her other shoulder. "You're being weird." Weird. I almost laughed again. "How long?" I asked, my voice flat, controlled. She blinked. "How long what?" I held her gaze, letting the silence stretch. "How long has this been going on?" She rolled her eyes, like I was asking something pointless. "Don't be like that," she said, waving me off. "It's not some big conspiracy." "Not a big deal," I said slowly, repeating her words back to her. "You heading out to meet some guy, letting him put his hands on you, that's not a big deal to you." For a split second, her confidence slipped. A flicker of something, guilt, maybe, crossed her face, but she buried it fast, straightening up. "I didn't say it wasn't important," she said, her voice smooth again. "I'm just saying this is how life works. People change. Relationships shift. You should be glad I'm not lying about it." Glad. I studied her, the way she looked at me. Not with regret, but with this detached air, like I was already a footnote in her story. That's when it hit me. She'd been planning this, maybe not the exact moment, but the shift. She'd been pulling away for months. Late nights at work, vague excuses, that slow fade in how she talked to me. This wasn't a whim. It was a choice. I took a step closer, keeping my voice low. "You're not the woman I married," I said. Her smirk widened, like she'd been waiting for that. Of course not, she shot back, almost amused. People grow. I've grown. Maybe you should too. She was talking to me like I was the unreasonable one, like I was the one who'd lost the plot. I exhaled, locking my emotions down tight. And what do you think I'm supposed to do with this, Jessica? She raised an eyebrow like it was obvious. Accept it, she said, glancing at her watch. I've got to go. Don't wait up. She'd made up her mind, and she thought I'd just roll over. She was wrong. I straightened up, my hands relaxing at my sides. Go, I said, simple as that. Threw her off. Her head tilted, lips parting slightly. You're okay with this? I smiled. Not a warm one, not the kind she knew. No, I said. But you've made your call. Now I get to make mine. Her fingers twitched at her side, a tiny crack in her armor. She looked nervous for the first time all night. Good. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind her. I didn't move. I didn't break anything. I just stood there, my mind racing faster than it had in years. She thought she was running this show, but she had no clue what was coming. The silence settled in after she left, thick and heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. I looked around, the photos on the walls, the coffee mug she'd left on the counter that morning, the life we'd built. It all looked the same, but it wasn't. I sank into a chair, rubbing my temples as my thoughts spun. How long had she been planning this? How long had I been blind, thinking we were just another couple riding out the usual bumps? Was it weeks? Months? I wanted to be furious, to smash something, to let out the roar building in my chest. But I didn't. All I felt was this cold, clear focus. She'd made her move. Now it was my turn. Most guys would have chased after her, demanded answers, maybe even pleaded. Not me. Jessica wanted a fight. She wanted me to unravel so she could feel justified, like I was the predictable husband she'd already checked out on. I wasn't giving her that. Instead, I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in too long. Hey, it's Ryan, I said when the line picked up. A pause, then a familiar voice. Ryan? Man, it's been forever. It was my brother, Michael. We hadn't talked in over a year. Not a falling out, just life pulling us apart. He'd moved a state over, built his own world, while I'd been stuck in this routine with Jessica. I need a favor, I said, cutting to the chase. Another pause. What kind? I gripped the phone tighter. I need to get out of here for a bit. Michael exhaled. You okay? Was I? Not really, but I wasn't about to spill it all over the phone. Not yet, I said. But I will be. Silence, then, come over. I hung up, grabbed my keys, and walked out without locking the door. For the first time in forever, I wasn't sure I'd be back. The drive to Michael's place felt longer than it should have, the highway stretching out under a sky turning gray with dusk. My hands gripped the wheel, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Jessica's words over and over. I'm going on a date with another man. Each loop made my chest ache, not with sadness, but with this strange, growing resolve. I'd spent years coasting, trusting her, never digging too deep. I didn't check her phone or play the jealous husband. Why would I? She'd given me no reason to doubt her. Until now. By the time I pulled into Michael's driveway, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to beg her to stay. I wasn't going to fight for someone who'd already checked out. I was done being the guy she thought she could walk over. I sat in the car for a minute, the engine humming, before stepping out and knocking on his door. It swung open fast, and there was Michael, hoodie, sweatpants, looking at me like I just dropped in from nowhere. Well, this is a surprise, he said, stepping aside. I walked in, the familiar smell of coffee hitting me. His place hadn't changed. Same old couch, same stack of books on the table. It was comforting, in a way. He shut the door and crossed his arms. All right, spill it. What's going on? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Jessica's cheating on me. The words felt strange, like they didn't belong to my life. Michael's face darkened. You sure? I let out a bitter laugh. She told me herself. Stood there in a dress I bought her, Said she was going on a date. Like it was no big deal. He whistled low. Wow, that's bold. Bold wasn't the half of it. I sank onto the couch, the weight of it all settling in. Michael sat across from me, tapping his knee, thinking. So what now? He asked. That was the question I'd been wrestling with since she walked out. Betrayal like that, it hollows you out at first, leaves you spinning. But then you get a choice. Stay down or take the reins. I wasn't staying down. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. I'm not chasing her. I'm not fighting for her. I'm done. Michael raised an eyebrow. Just like that. I shrugged. What's the point? Wait around while she's off with some guy? Try to win her back when she doesn't even care? No thanks. He nodded slowly. Fair. She doesn't deserve you running after her. He was right. But it wasn't just that she didn't deserve it. It was the way she'd done it, smirking, daring me to react. That wasn't just cheating. That was a power play. And I wasn't playing her game. She planned this, I said, the realization hitting me as I spoke. Michael frowned. What do you mean? I rubbed my face, piecing it together. She's been distant for months, working late, dodging me, acting like I'm an annoyance. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. She set it up, expected me to fall apart. That should have crushed me, but it didn't. It made me mad, mad enough to think straight. She'd counted on me being weak, and I wasn't going to let her win. Just then, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, Jessica. Hey, might be late. Don't wait up. I laughed. A short, sharp sound. Michael leaned over. She's serious? Yeah, I said, pocketing the phone. She still thinks she's calling the shots. But she wasn't. Not anymore. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was torn up, but because my head wouldn't stop running. I crashed in Michael's guest room, staring at the ceiling, mapping out what came next. Jessica thought she had me figured out, thought I'd be waiting when she strolled back in. She didn't know I was already 10 steps ahead. By morning, I had a plan. I called a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but the best I could find. His name was David Carter, and he had a reputation for winning, no matter the odds. Within an hour, I was in his office, sitting across from a guy who looked like he could stare down a judge and walk away smiling. So, David said, flipping through a notepad, your wife's stepping out, and she thinks you're just going to sit there? Pretty much, I said. He smirked. Her mistake. Tell me everything. I laid it out, her smirk, her casual announcement, the way she'd been pulling away. David listened, nodding, jotting notes. When I finished, he leaned back. This works for us, he said. She's not hiding it, which means she's not expecting you to push back. Let her keep thinking that. We'll hit her where it hurts. I exhaled, feeling lighter than I had in days. This wasn't just reacting anymore. This was me taking control. That evening, I went home. The house felt the same, her perfume still in the air, our pictures on the walls, but it didn't rattle me. She was the one who'd changed, not me. I was in the kitchen when I heard her key in the door. Jessica stepped in, tossing her purse down like nothing had happened, then froze when she saw me. Oh, she said, surprised. You're here. She hadn't expected that. I leaned against the counter, casual. Where else would I be? She studied me, trying to read me, waiting for me to crack. I didn't. How was your date? I asked, keeping my tone light. A flicker of something crossed her face, but she smiled, all sweet and fake. Great, actually. Thanks for asking. I nodded, like I cared, then pointed to the table where a stack of papers sat. Her eyes followed, and the second she saw them, her smirk faded. What's that? She asked, voice tight. I let the silence hang, watching her squirm. Divorce papers, I said, smooth as anything. Figured I'd save us both some time. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She hadn't seen this coming. She'd expected me to beg, not to walk away. You're serious? She said, quieter now. I nodded. Dead serious. She let out a shaky laugh, no humor in it. So that's it? You're just done. I tilted my head, giving her a small smile. Yep. Her eyes widened, and there it was, panic. She'd thought I'd be too broken to stand up. She'd misjudged me, and now she knew it. I turned and headed upstairs, leaving her standing there, stunned. She didn't follow, but I heard her breath catch, a little tremble in it. Good. Let her feel the ground shift. I locked the bedroom door behind me, not out of fear, but because I was done giving her anything. She'd said all she needed to when she walked out. Downstairs, she didn't leave. I heard her moving around, probably trying to figure out how to turn this back on me. She was good at that, spinning things, playing the victim. But not this time. I pulled out my phone and texted David. She's seen the papers. What's next? His reply came quick. Keep her guessing. We've got this. I smirked. She had no idea what was coming. A knock on the door broke the quiet. I ignored it. Another, harder this time. Then her voice, sharp. Ryan. I didn't answer. Ryan, can we talk? She said, softer now. Talk? Now she wanted to talk. After she'd strutted out like this was all a game, I unlocked the door but didn't open it. She pushed in, her usual confidence gone, replaced by something unsteady. So you're just ending it? She said, folding her arms. I met her eyes, unflinching. Yeah. She shook her head. This is ridiculous. I almost laughed. Ridiculous? She'd humiliated me, treated me like nothing, and now I was the ridiculous one? What's ridiculous? I said. Is you thinking I just sit here while you do whatever you want? She blinked, caught off guard. I thought we had an understanding, she muttered. I raised an eyebrow. An understanding? That I'd be fine with you dating other guys. She sighed, frustrated. Marriage isn't some perfect little box, Ryan. Things change. Yeah, I said, stepping closer. And you changed it. Not me. She flinched just barely, but I saw it. The fight was draining out of her, and I wasn't giving her an inch. Jessica stood there in the bedroom, arms crossed, her eyes searching mine for some crack she could pry open. I didn't give her one. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she said, her voice low, like she was trying to reason with me. I stepped closer, keeping my tone cold and steady.
No, Jessica.
You made it harder when you decided I didn't deserve the truth. Her jaw tightened, and for a second, she didn't have a comeback. That was new. Usually she'd twist things, flip the script, but not this time. So what now? She said finally. We just toss everything out? I tilted my head. You already did. She flinched again, harder this time, and I felt the air shift. She turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing down the hall. I didn't follow. I didn't care anymore. The weight on my chest wasn't pain, it was freedom. I sat on the bed, letting out a slow breath. The house was quiet now, except for the faint sounds of her downstairs. Glass clinking, shoes scuffing the floor. Signs of a woman who'd just realized she wasn't untouchable. She'd expected me to chase her, to beg her to stay. She never thought I'd let her go. Then I heard her voice, muffled through the walls. I cracked the door, listening. I don't know, she hissed into her phone. He's not doing what I thought he would. My grip on the doorknob tightened. Who was she talking to? Her tone wasn't smug anymore, it was shaky. No, I didn't think he'd be thrilled, but I figured he'd fight for me, she said. A pause, then quieter. What if I got this wrong? I almost laughed. Got it wrong? That was the understatement of the year. She'd built this whole plan, thinking I'd play my part. Fall apart, give her the drama she wanted. Too bad for her, I wasn't that guy. No, he doesn't know, she said after a beat. Why would I tell him? That'd mess everything up. Another pause. I'll figure it out. Just stick to what we said. The plan. Of course there was a plan. Jessica didn't move without a safety net. This wasn't just a fling, it was a setup, and I was supposed to be the fool who didn't see it. I stepped back, my mind racing but calm. If she wanted to play, I'd play better. For the next few days, I watched her. She hovered around her phone, checked it constantly, started sentences she didn't finish. She was waiting for me to snap, to give her something to work with. I gave her nothing. I went about my days, work, coffee, normal stuff, while she stewed. It was driving her crazy, and I could see it in the way she'd glance at me, unsure. People like her don't handle calm well. On the fourth day, I made my move. She was out, probably meeting whoever was on the other end of that call. I met with David again, finalizing the divorce. He'd worked it so she'd get nothing. No house, no assets, just the consequences of her own choices. She's got no leverage, David said, grinning. You've got her cold. I nodded. Good. That night, I waited at the kitchen table, a glass of water in front of me, the papers ready. Jessica walked in, stopped short when she saw me. Sit, I said, pointing to the chair. She hesitated, then sat, her hands fidgeting. I slid the folder across the table. Open it, I said. She did, and her face went still as she read. You've been planning this, I said, casual. So I plan too. She swallowed hard, gripping the papers. This is finalized? Yep, I said. And since you're the one who stepped out, it's all in my favor. Her eyes flicked up, wide with something I hadn't seen before, fear. Ryan, I cut in. I don't care what you were going to say. I don't care who he is. Just pack your stuff and get out. Her breath hitched. You can't mean that. I do, I said, standing. You wanted this. Now you've got it. Go. She stared at me, then let out a shaky, bitter laugh. I guess I misjudged you. Yeah, I said. You did. I grabbed my keys and walked out, leaving her there with the wreckage of her plan. But I wasn't done. The guy she'd been seeing, I needed to know who he was. Back at David's office, I leaned forward. Can you find him? David nodded. Give me a couple days. 2 days later, he had a name, James Carter. Mid-30s, works in sales, married with a kid. I chuckled, dry. So he's a pro at this. David leaned back. Want me to dig deeper? I thought about it. No, I said. Just make sure he knows this isn't a game he wins. David raised an eyebrow but didn't push. I've got contacts. Nothing messy. Just a message. I nodded. Do it. A few days later, word got back. James had a run-in with some guys outside his office. Nothing permanent, just enough to make him think twice. I didn't ask details. Didn't need to. Jessica fought the divorce for months, dragging it out with excuses, claiming I'd been distant, fighting for the house, even asking for support. David shredded every argument, laying out her lies like evidence in a trial. When the judge ruled, I got everything. She got nothing. She left town after that, heard she moved west, chasing a fresh start. I didn't care. I stayed in the house, reframed the pictures, made it mine again. One night, sitting on the couch with a beer, Michael called. How you holding up? He asked. I smiled, real this time. Good. Better than good. She didn't see you coming, he said, laughing. Nope, I said. Her mistake. I hung up, looking around. The place felt different now. Not haunted, not empty, just mine. Jessica had thought she'd break me, thought she'd walk away with everything while I crumbled. She'd underestimated me from the start. I took a sip, letting the quiet settle in. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone. I wasn't reacting. I was free. And something told me she'd regret this a lot more than I ever would. Life has a way of balancing out like that. She'd made her choice, strutted out with that smirk, thinking she'd won. But in the end, I was the one still standing. And I wasn't looking back.